Yo, yo, yo. Welcome back to Hydroponics Daily. It's your main man, Dr. Russell Sharp. We're bringing you everything soilless cultivation. Today is an amazing podcast episode that's going to have you on tenterhooks. It's all about root aphids. Yeah, not something that immediately says, wow, this is going to be a banger of an episode, but it should be very interesting. I sound like I'm drunk, don't I? Or high. I'm not. The most exciting thing I've done today is walk around a cricket pitch 5 times and then realize, oh, sugar, I've got a podcast to record. And I've got this one in the bank, one about root aphids, and it's one that I wanted to give full justice to. So I'm going to use a number of different sources. Root aphids are very important for hydroponic crops, but they are very poorly studied. One, because they're subterranean and everything under the soil, just like everything under the sea, is very poorly studied because they don't like getting down and dirty. And also because they don't affect many major staple food crops. So root aphids are normally these things that sort of go on crops if they get in from weeds, and so the plants around your crops might be infected with them. There's a few ornamental plants that suffer from root aphids, like roses, but for most crops, they don't. But hemp and legal cannabis, it is a major issue, especially in places like Spain. A lot of growers in Spain, when I've been to shows in Barcelona, they've mentioned, God, we got anything for root aphid? Got anything for root aphid? It's a big problem. And root aphid is interesting because it's not like thrips or spider mite. It's not the worst pest in the world. If you get it, it's not going to kill your crop. But it's not the most widespread. It's localized. It's not the most common pest in hydroponics. However, it's very difficult to diagnose. And once you've got it, it's very difficult, near impossible to eradicate. And so that's why I want to study it. And I want to talk about it. So these are aphids, so like green fly, black fly, you might refer to them, that there can be a number of colours. So they can be white, they can be black, they can be green, just like aphids can be. And they can be winged or wingless, just like the aphids that suck the sap on the underside of your leaves. However, they're normally waxy and they leave a waxy deposit around the roots. So on Spotify, you'll get the podcast episode artwork, which I don't think comes through on Apple. It probably comes through on Amazon, and you'll see these waxy deposits around the waxy aphids, and they don't look like normal aphids. They look like they've got this waxy coat on them, and they may not be always on the root. They may be on the stem as well. So that's why people can get confused, because they get aphids on the lower part of the stem or the lower leaves, and they think, well, it can't be root aphid because they're not on the roots, but they can be. Root aphids can go further up the plant. And as I say, they're poorly studied, and most aphids, they have a weird life cycle. And I'm trying to stop saying the word. So I just said it there, and it really annoys me because it's one of the biggest problems with my podcasting is saying, right, I'm going to do the rest of the podcast without saying it. Aphids, they have a life cycle that's very strange. So they can give birth to pregnant babies. Mad, isn't it? They don't need to have sex to reproduce. This is called parthenogenesis. In plants, it's also called parthenocarpy. When plants can produce seeds, carp is the Latin for, or Greek for seed. Parthenocarpy, seeds without sex or without sexual transfer of genetics. Whereas aphids, parthenogenesis, they produce pregnant young that just by mitosis, and they produce babies. And so this is really quick process. But they also have alternate hosts. So they go from one plant to another to complete their life cycle. And there's one that grows on willow plants, and it's called the willow aphid, or the giant willow aphid, largest aphid in the world. And it grows in a graveyard about 200 meters from where I am recording this podcast. There is a willow plant that's got these giant aphids on. And what's interesting about that is, for a couple of months of the year, nobody knows where these giant aphids go. You can't put a tracker on an aphid. They don't know where they go. They could be root aphids that suddenly go into the ground. No one knows. No one's found out. If you could find where the willow aphid goes for those 2 months of the year, you would be a rock star in the entomology world. So there's something. If you're looking for an interesting study subject, have a look at that. And root aphids, they're just the same. People don't know much about them. And I think there's going to be a lot of research on root aphids because it's becoming an increasing problem in legal cannabis, and they're so poorly studied. And so it'd be an interesting topic for people to study. And I think a lot of these universities that are getting into the legal cannabis phase will talk about root aphids coming up. So we say the telltale sign is this waxy secretion on the roots. However, I grow lots of plants in my greenhouse and in my grow rooms. I very rarely look at the roots because I don't want to be disturbing the root system. You don't want to be damaging roots because that will affect the plants and their ability to produce and their ability to create yield. And so that's why it goes undiagnosed. So you might mistake a infestation of root aphids with a nutrient deficiency or a virus or some sort of environmental stress. And then they'll get to the point where your plants are just keeling over and you're going to the point where you're throwing them away. You take them out the pots and then you see the root aphids, and that's when you go, oh, sugar. And then if you're growing in soil or you're growing in the soil in the ground, then you're in for a world of pain because then you've got an infestation that you've got to get rid of. So they can also be mistaken for root mealybug. And mealybugs are related to aphids, so they're a type of things. And then probably the first sign that you've got root aphids might be ants going into your growing media, because ants feed on the honeydew, the excretia of the aphids, for a nice word. And ants may farm the root aphids and move them around to different plants in your grow room or in your grow setup. So yeah, that's root aphids. They, as I say, they might have a secondary host. Drought can have a similar effect to the roots, and can exacerbate the issues. What else can we say about root aphids? There's quite a lot to say. Let me pause the podcast and just find my notes. Yeah, let's talk about control. So first bit of control is quarantine, making sure that you don't bring them into your system, especially if you're bringing in plants from Spain, for example. Don't bring plants in soil. Try and use snips or cuttings or seeds if possible. Obviously, you want to. That's not always possible in crops like legal cannabis, where you want to protect phenotypes and genetics. And then soil sterilization is your only method. Now, you can't just spray with an insecticide because it's not like just applying a small amount to a root. You need to have a vast quantity to go into the root system because there's so much water in the root already. There's so much material. Your chances of applying a root-based insecticide and that's not systemic to kill aphids is minimal. You probably need to apply a systemic insecticide, and then you have the issues of residues in your crop from that. You could try steam sterilization of your grow media once your plants have been removed. You could try peroxide treatment of your grow media, but that will impact your roots. What other ways of sterilization have you got? You can't use methyl bromide anymore. That got banned by Maggie Thatcher because she saved the ozone layer. A lot of people on the left-wing politics don't like me mentioning that, but she did. Methyl bromide was banned because of the Montreal Protocol. Maggie Thatcher bashed some heads together and banned CFCs and methyl bromide. And so now we have an ozone layer, but we don't have a very potent soil sterilization chemical. At Utrema, we have something called lime sulfur, which is an organic soil sterilization chemical. It doesn't harm the plants if used at low dose rates, but if you're using in rock wool, things like that, you can't really use it because it's a bit too spicy for the plants. So it's a bit hit and miss. You might want to start at a low dose rate if you've got root aphids and move up from there. So that's probably your best method of controlling root aphids when you've got crops in the ground. Obviously, being an aphid, they can transfer viruses. So you could have secondary infection of viruses and other diseases. Obviously, the symptoms of root aphids are seen on the leaves, even if the root aphids aren't there. So it'll look like magnesium deficiency or iron deficiency. So if you see those, always check the roots before you start applying iron and magnesium, just so that it's not that. Another top tip, when removing infected plants, always be really careful and dispose of all the grow media well away from your plants. Although you've probably got the whole grow room infected once you've got some. You're very, very lucky if you get some in a grow room or a greenhouse, and then it's not infecting the whole material. If you're growing in sort of things like rock wool or aeroponics, where there's less grow media or no grow media, then you probably stand more chance of controlling it. And size-wise, we're talking 1 to 3 millimeters for the aphids. So that's something we're talking that sort of size range, not the giant willow aphids, which can be up to a centimeter, massive things, maybe half a centimeter long. And then control also, sticky traps will help because they will fly between the plants, and then preventing something called the green bridge. So aphids, if you can kill off all the plants and then not have any other plants in the grow room for 3 weeks, in theory, you kill the green bridge because aphids only survive on living plant material. However, we've had aphids in our grow room. We've killed off all the plants, left them for well over 3 weeks, whacked up the heat, reduced the humidity. In theory, all the aphids should have been dead, but they still survived and infected the next crop along. So remove all the grow media. That would be my advice, and disinfect the grow room. Wait 3 weeks just because 1 or 2 aphids might be around in a nook or a cranny. Blast it with UVB. Get one of those reptile lights. I mean, you could even blast it with UVC if you can get hold of a UVC light, but they will seriously damage your health if you expose yourself to UVC. So you'd need to put them on a timer or something like that. You could put an ozone generator in the grow room to further sterilize it and things like that while the plants are not there. So root aphids, not a massive problem. Localized problems like places in Spain. Not a problem on most crops. Problem on roses, weeds, grass species, legal cannabis. And it's not a mass. It doesn't cause major damage like serious loss of crop entirely. It just weakens the plants and makes them wilted and things like that. If you've got a really bad infestation, it would obviously kill the plant off, but it's a big issue because it's hard to diagnose, and once you've got it, it's really hard to eradicate. So that's been Hydroponics Daily for today. An amazing, interesting episode all about the fantastic root aphids. Have something more jolly and more techie tomorrow. If you found this interesting, or you know somebody suffered from root aphids, please share this. And if you have had it shared with you, then please, you owe that person who shared it with you a very large drink. Thank you very much for listening. Until tomorrow, this has been Hydroponics Daily. Goodbye.